Hi, class. In Unit 4, we're going to cover chapters 12 through 14. First, I'm going to discuss meeting structure, next facilitating, and then finally decision making. So let's talk about meetings first. We're all involved in meetings at work or at school or for volunteer activities one way or another. And we know that there are benefits of meetings, right? Sometimes we get tired of attending them, so we kind of lose track or lose sight of how beneficial they can be. But of course, at meetings, decisions are usually made. People can get up to date on progress and what's going on in the organization. Organizational norms are shaped. Isn't that interesting? Who thought about meetings being used as a tool to shape organizational norms? But they do, because you can tell a lot about how an organization operates by its meeting processes. Are they fast? Are they short? Are they efficient or not? Managers are supposed to be trained to conduct the meetings and help interact with their team, thus feeling a psychological need to be part of a team. And projects and team members are kept on track, and hopefully people are held accountable. And of course, we could list 10 more things, 10 more problems with meetings, but of course, as you know, they can be inefficient and ineffective because people fail to plan, right? They may show up and say, hey, I think this is what we're going to talk about today, and not have a real plan. Interpersonal dynamics, you may have competing coworkers, competing departments, competing supervisors that make meetings really hard to sit through and awkward for everybody else around. Another problem is that there may be too many people that are involved in making decisions, so therefore it's hard for decisions to get made. And then there's a redundancy of people and effort. In other words, too many people, there are too many people doing the same thing, working on the same thing. And I'm sure if you sat here right now, you could say aloud another problem with the meeting, right? So we have different types of meetings, and I never really thought to stop and think about this too deeply. Because I worked in public administration for 17 years before I became a professor. And the only type of meetings we ever had were the information dissemination meetings. So we always had critical information for our board members. I worked for a public retirement system, and we covered police officers and firefighters. So we were always sharing information. Actually, we had a board of trustees, which meant that they had fiduciary or money responsibility in the system. So we would share critical information with them. Maybe it would be an update on a pension plan law. We would allocate time to address audience questions if an audience came. Make sure that everybody had a clear and full understanding of the information. And this goes beyond just information sharing, because an information sharing meeting is short. That's usually like a press announcement, if you want to think of that in a way. But an individual or member share information that has been gathered, or they provide an update. You can also have problem solving or decision making meetings. Of course, you come together to solve a problem, and it requires the full participation of everyone there. Obviously, if there's a decision to be made, it's going to require more time than information sharing and probably information dissemination meetings. You can also have a symbolic or social meeting, which I know a lot of corporations do this. So employees get to celebrate a special event. Maybe somebody is retiring. This is a valuable way of encouraging a positive organizational culture, because it encourages people to get together and be positive. So those symbolic meetings are just as important too as to the ones in where you make decisions and you disseminate information. So what are some strategies for effective meetings? And you've probably found this before in your teams or your groups that you have to meet together with for school. So before a meeting, you need to clarify the purpose. And if you think back to writing a speech, it's real similar. You're going to write pretty much a specific purpose statement. What do you plan to accomplish by the end of the meeting? Why are you meeting? What kind of communication channel will you choose? Will it be face-to-face? Will it be virtual? Will it be by phone? How will you meet? And then who will you invite? So which participants need to be there? And then finally, someone, usually a manager, develops the plan for the meeting and writes a meeting agenda. And this is the kind of meeting that I was used to. Like the director of the agency I worked for, she always wrote a meeting agenda. And then she wouldn't write this on the agenda, but in her mind, she would think about the amount of time that it would take to cover each item on the agenda, so that we had a rough estimate of meeting time. Also, what we can do during a meeting is really pay close attention to what's going on. Watch the process, listen to the process, make notes if you need to. So it's not that you're just a dull participant sitting there. You can actually engage even if you're not being called upon to talk as much. So here are some advantages of virtual meetings. Of course, it saves a ton of time. It saves cost and travel. People can call in from everywhere. You can gather a lot more people to talk, such as subject matter experts and consultants, and you can make, you don't have to wait as long maybe as you would at a face-to-face meeting. So when you're thinking about who should participate in the meeting, think closely about this, just not maybe everybody in, marketing should attend. No, maybe just a small sector of marketing employees should attend. Who are people that are best suited to contribute to the objective of the meeting, whether it's decision making, handing out information, or announcing information? Are there enough lower level employees that are in part of the mix? Who will be affected by the outcome of the meeting? Do I have any subject experts, any problem solvers? And do I have people who think a little bit differently about decision making? Then you develop the plan, the agenda. So you write it down and you list the points of the discussion. Usually if I write an agenda, I have a group that I belong to, so we have an opening and then we work through old business and then we work toward new business. We discuss it and then we adjourn and set the next meeting date. That's kind of a rough outline of how those meetings go. But here you see an agenda should include a list of tasks, and you can put the estimated time it will take to discuss those on the agenda. But sometimes that backfires and people feel really rushed, so you want to think carefully about doing that. You talk about the decisions that need to be made and what the expected outcome is for the meeting. Decide on a time and place, again, virtual, face-to-face, who can come. So you have to ask people ahead of time and not just set the day and time. You have to ask. Ensure that the arrangements are comfortable and that people are comfortable and can participate well. And of course, logistics. Where is it going to be held? Does everybody have your phone number or someone that they can get in touch with if they get lost? And then, you can use calendaring at work. If you all I share Outlook with my colleagues. There are tons and tons of calendar apps, but that helps too. And of course, a texting app helps too. So there are lots of ways to reach people. So here are some sample operating guidelines that are suggested in our text. Everybody gets an agenda. You may have a timekeeper, especially if there is a concern about the meeting running over. You'll have a timekeeper, and you'll have a leader for each meeting. That's usually called the chairperson. Meetings start on time. You review the agenda, or actually, people should get a copy of the agenda beforehand. And then the meetings end on time with a process check, which we'll talk about in a minute, unless everyone agrees to extend the meeting. You know how it is with meetings. You have 10 people that are there on time and 2 people that are late. Well, basically, that's their problem if they get there late. They don't need to interrupt and ask what's up. They just need to sit down and get up to speed. And you need to practice active listening and make sure that higher level members are not stifling or silencing lower level members, which is inappropriate use of power. But it is hard to speak up if you're a lower level employee and your boss is sitting right there. So you have to think about what's appropriate, I guess, and monitor, just self-monitor. Remember, we've read about that concept in the book as well. A lot of times the team leader or chair will summarize the decision that's been made. And in the meetings that I've attended, we use parliamentary procedure. I can't say that word. And that's how we vote. Someone the chair asks for a motion to approve or whatever, and someone makes the motion, and then someone seconds, and that goes on the record. But there are other ways, of course, to reach agreement. So you just have to agree on that beforehand. And then summarizing what's been discussed today can also bring closure for the meeting and clarify what's been accomplished. So it's not just about showing up for a meeting. It's about, here's what we're going to talk about. Let's talk about it. Let's summarize it. That sounds like a speech, doesn't it? Okay, I can't help it because I teach public speaking too. But it does. It's a lot of that redundant communication, but it helps people to hear information more than. So the process check. I've never been in a meeting where anybody's done this, but our textbook author suggests that a process check helps members disclose how they felt about what was accomplished and how it was accomplished. That could be fine in a really small group, but if you have a really big group, that could extend the meeting time pretty long. So you would want to use that process checking sparingly. And then, of course, you'll plan the next meeting. People will have their action items, which is their list of tasks to take away with them to do before the next meeting. All right, so now that I've talked a little bit about meetings and how important it is to structure them, let's talk about working in teams and specifically facilitation. I use this word a lot. But a facilitator focuses on a team's process more than the content. So a facilitator is there to help guide and help move people through a process. So the process is how the team achieves its goals, and then the content is what the team is doing. So a facilitator, their responsibilities vary from team to team. It depends on the team goal, what the team needs, the employee makeup of the team. A facilitator needs to be able to easily adapt. They should be a strong communicator. And it doesn't say that here, but that is a strong component of being a facilitator because there's a lot of self-awareness that goes into being a facilitator. You're aware of your own strengths and weaknesses and biases. You easily adapt to team goals, to the members on that team, and context. Here we go. Expertise in verbal and nonverbal communication, observation skills, and the ability to give assertive, concise feedback to help team members with unproductive behaviors. So you have to learn how to speak criticism in a productive way. So a facilitator has a lot of communication skills. And for those of us who are strong communicators, we probably have been put in a facilitating role before because that is just one of our natural abilities or developments. A facilitator is also familiar with decision making and problem solving. They can manage group dynamics and they can observe and kind of analyze group behavior and help them move through a process. So if a group kind of gets stuck in one of Tuckman's stages, the storming stage, then the facilitator could step in and help the group move through that. Schein, Edward Schein, he was an organizational consultant manager in the early 80s. He was one of the first that were recognized for looking at organizational culture. But he has these three types of group behavior that should be really familiar to you as a communication major, and especially if you've taken small group communication. He looks at task-related behaviors on a team, maintenance-related behaviors, and dysfunctional behaviors. So let's just review a few of these, but task-related behaviors, that's a person that focuses on the content of the meeting and what needs to be done to meet the team goals. Maintenance related, that's related to how this person interacts to but to coordinate the interpersonal processes, the interpersonal communication that's going on in the team. And then you have dysfunctional behaviors. Yes, on every team. These are people that get in the way or undermine team progress. And we all know these people too, right? If I had to pick one, I would say that I get really stuck on task-related behaviors, but then I'll kind of default to maintenance-related behaviors. So task-related behaviors, we see these roles right here listed on the left under behavior. So if you have somebody who initiates, they propose an idea or a task, and they can, kind of push the team in one direction. You may have somebody who tests consensus. Maybe there's been a lot of discussion and they're not really clear on what's happening on the team. So they ask for what everybody's feeling. So maybe it's a yes or no vote, or it could be a simple, excuse me, I'm not really sure where we are in the discussion about this. Could somebody summarize? So consensus checking, testing. We have maintenance related behaviors. Remember I said these relate to the interpersonal dynamics in the group. So let's see. I like the harmonizing and compromising person because they normally reduce tension, and if there's a conflict, then they'll always look for middle ground. And they're taking a risk when they jump into a conflict. So harmonizers and compromisers are usually pretty good at what they do. Gatekeeping, usually have gatekeepers. Say one person's not contributing much, then they may ask that person what their opinion is so they can have an opportunity to voice it to the group. Because a lot of times high status members take over meetings, and they don't mean to, but they kind of dominate the meeting so that people who are less assertive don't have a chance to talk. So a gatekeeper just ensures that those people have a chance to talk and participate. All right, dysfunctional behaviors. Oh man, the withdrawn person. They're silent, they're distracted, maybe they're playing on their phone, maybe they're just doodling, which there's really nothing wrong with doodling, but of course most of us look at that as people aren't paying attention. Although you can be thinking and doodling, but you have self-seekers. That's just a person with they have a personal goal, and by gosh, they are going to accomplish it at the risk of just kind of blowing up the group. They don't care. You have blockers who hate every decision. They'll shoot down everything. So here's a list of how to deal with problem people, and you guys can look at this in your book too, of course, but these are some really good communication strategies that you might want to be familiar with for your next meeting. They're good. All right, our last chapter is understanding and working in teams, and specifically in this chapter, we're going to look at making decisions and creative problem solving. Fun, right? All right, so decision making is a process in which several possibilities are considered, sometimes prioritized, but decision making means that there's going to be a clear choice of one over the other. It helps managers identify and select different opportunities. It helps managers solve immediate problems. And based on past successes in decision making, it can also help managers solve future problems and make them more manageable. You know how it is. You get the benefit of experience, and you can take that experience and you can apply it to future situations. So good decision makers, we see some characteristics here. They're super, super good at processing information, at thinking about what the risks are, and making choices that result in good outcomes for the organization. They're also concise. They have an ability to look and analyze and see what's presented to them as far as the options and make a decision. And here's a chart out of the book. This is figure 14.1 out of your book, but I like it because it's a hierarchy, and it starts at the bottom here with identifying core issues, and it ends with making a decision. So look over that process and think about that for your next meeting. Do the people in your meetings follow a process like this? Sometimes people are tired of talking about a decision, so they may rush, but if it's a really important one, you'll see a representation of each step in this figure. So one way to make decisions is through collaborative decision making, and that's where maybe you have two parties, and so you identify each other's priorities and you determine the options that will be beneficial to both of you. So you pay attention and carry it out, like I said, by assessing each one's primary needs, continuous positive communication, a willingness to be creative in generating options. So there's a lot of flexibility going on here. You have people that are invested, you have people that want to help each other and that want to be collaborative. So collaborative decision making should not be forced on groups of people that don't want to be collaborative. Maybe they want a win-win or a win-lose. Win-lose. So they don't want to be collaborated. But when you have groups of people that are willing to be flexible, this is a great model of making. It also helps, one of the benefits is that it can help the group learn new knowledge, gain insight and the experiences of other people. So to use an analogy, someone on the other side of the fence, now you can understand their position, you know a little bit more about their position, you gain some new knowledge, you've also exchanged new ideas. So it's very creative. Again, flexibility to me is the key word here. The 6 thinking hats diagram, you see this right here, but I included a link in the Unit 4 content. It's a really short little video. Well, I think it goes to a Forbes website, but then there's a short 2-minute video that explains this so much better than I could do by moving around all these labels. So be sure and watch that in Unit 4 content. Again, just a little short. You can also use the approaches of affinity and multi-voting. So affinitizing, that helps organize and produce agreement on categories of ideas. It's a really, what's the word I want to use? It's a very detailed approach to decision making. It involves charts and organizations, and it's very time consuming. Multi-voting, it's fine, it's just very time consuming. So just know that if you're trying to make a simple decision, affinitizing probably wouldn't be it. But if you need to make an organizational decision that affects maybe a few departments or groups of employees, then affinitizing could be a good approach to decision making. Multi-voting, that's used with a brainstorm list of topics or a list that's been pared down from an affinitized list. The other thing to think about here is creative problem solving. How many times have you been around a coworker or supervisor and they default to the same way of making decisions? It's like almost like they're stuck in a rut, and you have a great idea to approach an issue from a completely different way, but maybe nobody wants to hear it. So you have to have open-minded people to engage in creative decision making. But it's fun. It's interesting to me because I always see multiple possibilities in so many things. But it increases the likelihood of generating interesting and cost-effective ways to make decisions in business. And you see the world not as it is, but as it could be. So possibilities. There's my word again. Possibilities. And what's the old saying? We've always done it that way, so we need to basically continue to do it that way. No, that's not true. If you have buy-in, you can really engage in problem solving. It requires both convergent and divergent thinking. So convergent thinking means you've got your problem, right? You know what it is, you've analyzed it, and your group works to moving toward a solution. On the other hand, divergent thinking, you generate new ideas to look at a problem. So you're not just starting from this is problem A. You're starting out with, okay, let's look at different ways to look at this problem instead of just seeing it one way. And then let's talk about new ideas to approach the problem. So that's divergent thinking. Convergent thinking would probably happen more in a group that had a tendency toward groupthink, and then divergent thinking would happen in a group where there was a lot of flexibility, people saw a lot of possibilities to engage in, and enjoyed dialogue, enjoyed talking. So you have stages of creative problem solving. You have preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification. So of course the preparation stage involves gathering information, defining the problem. Incubation, that's just thinking about it. Is thinking about it. What is the solution? And I don't know, I guess I engage in incubation quite a bit. Maybe you do too, but it's like I have a problem, I have an issue, I really need to think about it. And then illumination, that's kind of where you have that aha moment and you write out or say a creative solution. And then that creative solution can be, discussed and thought through, and you can generate some more ideas for it. But finally, you come to the stage of verification. That's where you evaluate the solution based on what you need to get accomplished, based on your goal. You can also engage in generating novel ideas by the analogy method or assumption smashing. And I love assumption smashing because it's basically, okay, we're going to throw all this old stuff away, this old thinking away, and we're going to think about this issue, this goal, this problem from a completely different perspective. And maybe that different perspective is supervisors have always thought about the problem or the goal. Let's get employee input, okay? So let's look at it from a completely different way. An analogy method, I think people do this one a lot too. It's like, well, company A solved the problem this way or created a new idea this way. So let's kind of imitate what they've been doing, which that's not necessarily bad, but it's not as creative as assumption smashing.